Welcome along to the Big Ideas Show today with a special live audience. In today's show, we'll be talking about the burden of burning ideas with Jim Lockey. So, Jim, why should they listen?
We're talking about big ideas, and because these guys have been kneeling on the floor for a full hour.
There we go. What better reason? Big Ideas Show. It's coming up next. So, welcome along to another Big Ideas Show. Today, we have this exciting addition of a live audience around us. Let's see you, Jim. Woo, woo, woo. Just to prove, we do have a live audience, and I also have my wonderful guest for today, who is Jim Lockey. Hello.
Hello.
This is good. Okay, so today's topic is the burden of burning ideas. And, Jim, you've got a specific project that was one of those burning ideas, right? So should we dive straight in and hear a little bit about, because it was a topic that kind of had very much come up for you that we thought would be great. So what is the burden of a burning idea?
It's one of those ideas that, I don't know, if you're a creative person, you get ideas all the time. Things come, and some things you might want to pursue, other things you let go, and you kind of get used to that rhythm of just some things dropping away, some things don't. And the burden of an idea is to have an idea that just doesn't let you leave it alone, and just kind of sticks around and demands that you do something about it. And it was kind of, that was the thing that was interesting to me. That was why I thought that'd be interesting to talk about. Yeah,
because I guess we always see ideas as a very positive thing. Like, yeah, it's great to have loads of ideas and, you know, the whole light bulb moment, but we have those ideas that will not leave us out and can become quite negative and destructive. Do you find, because it's like that inspiration that comes with a new idea, and that energy, or at least this is how I experience, that energy stays around in your chest and it starts to kind of become a bit destructive in on itself. Is that, how would you describe that feeling?
I guess it could. I think it's the thing of, it's something that needs to be managed and needs to be handled, because the reality of life is you're not always able to pursue things. So, for instance, like with this work that I'm working on at the moment that we've alluded to, is the first work of that scale that I've done in about 6 years, essentially, since my wife got pregnant with our first of two kids. And then, so we've had 5-6 years of just bringing up young children. So we haven't had the capacity to go and do things. Yeah,
a very justifiable reason to not be going off doing crazy projects, but unfortunately we can't always shut our brain down to say, right, no, now's not the time for a good idea. So let's talk a bit more specifically about your project. Do you want to tell us what the project is first off, because we've hinted about it, and then take us back to the journey of it not being something that wouldn't get away from you, and how that experience of making, because it is something you've now putting into practice and making happen, but before that point where you were able to do that.
Yeah, so the work is a cardboard canoe, which is 3 meters long. I'm building it at the moment, and by the end of the month it will be finished, and we're going to take it out to Hythe Canal and paddle it around until it inevitably fails, and film that and turn that into an artwork. Okay,
so go on, tell us. I know we're jumping subjects a little bit, but tell us a little bit about the background to that.
So it's going to be presented as part of Normal Festival of the Brain this year, which is a really good festival. It happens in Folkestone, put on by the Quarterhouse, Living Words, and Folkestone Fringe. They kind of come together, put on this really cool festival, which is all about kind of bringing together the arts and science, thinking about the brain. And so this work is kind of about grief and about loss and the kind of human capacity to keep going in the face of that, and to kind of keep doing things, keep being creative, or to kind of keep investing in relationships, while we have this kind of knowledge that this is all gonna one day end and come apart. So it's really cheerful.
Absolutely. There's a whole nother topic talking about that project, isn't there? But let's take it back. Let's keep on topic for this time round. So where did that idea come from? What started it? And what was that journey like before it could become a reality, before you knew, yes, this is going to happen?
I think it's one of the things of, it comes from, a number of different places. These things kind of percolate and come up. But I remember very specifically it kind of being galvanised while I was working for the Triennial on Folkestone as an art school, and it was just sort of a line that someone said about making a ship out of concrete and the absurdity of that.
Yeah.
And then I was thinking, well, people do make ships out of concrete all the time, because I was just being nerdy. But then thinking about that, just got onto this idea of entropy and things, which is something actually that's kind of a big theme in my work. And so it came from that, and the original title for the work, which was Substance Lapsing Unsubstantial, which we had to change because no one could pronounce it.
And what is it now?
It's now just called Boat.
Brilliant. I like it.
But it carries all those same things. It's, the idea of a vessel of everything that you've, kind of thought and invest in is, eventually goes. So that, these, who knows where these things really came from. But once it was there and it was formed, it was still this kind of thing of, then you've got the work of finding someone to commission it or finding funding for it somehow, and not knowing. This is quite a big project, at least for me, and to get from the idea to realising the thing was like, 6 or 8 months of just trying to work out how to do it. And then so at first it's like little things. I don't know. Should we?
Okay. So
ask me other questions?
Okay. So let's go back to the burden element. How long was it until you could actually take action on any of it? Kind of, could you do anything? And how did you try and stop yourself? Did you try and get rid of the idea?
I think this is the thing with this one, is where it just kept re-emerging, because I think have things that could be large scale projects that just like, well, I can't do that in the moment, I'll let it go, or start working on something, this is bigger than I can manage at the moment, I'll let that go and hopefully it'll come back later. And this was one where I guess I tried to do that same pattern, and it was like, no, keep going with it.
Okay.
And also I was aware, I mentioned about my children, I was aware that my son has just started school in September, so it was that actually I want to find something that's a bit bigger than before, something that's maybe bigger than I can manage. Yeah. Because so then I was like, I had a reason to hold on to it as well, because I needed to kind of
have something
to start.
Focus.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you think if it hadn't have been that timing with your son going to school, would it have maybe been one that had slipped away?
Who knows? It certainly felt like it was just. It had a kind of, to speak in kind of mythological terms, that it wanted to be made. Like it, kind of comes and it rests on you, and that I don't know how to describe that other than the fact that this is something that it wanted to be made, and so I don't know if it would have gone anywhere. It would have stuck about.
Okay. And is there any noticeable ways that it changes your behaviour in everyday things? And just as an observation, that when these big things stick around, how much of our time do we get distracted being absorbed by them?
A huge amount of mental real estate. So it kind of goes, have the initial idea, and then that leads to, I've just spent 4 hours on YouTube looking at people making canoes. And even before I knew whether, it was just like, I'm going to just know everything about this. And that was before knowing if I could make it. And I think that is always something you can do, is like, okay, I can't make this today, but what steps can I take today that will bring me closer to being able to realise it? Yeah. And if I look back to first having the idea, it was initially that. It was just like, I watched a load of videos, or, then I was ended up starting to read kind of poetry and stuff around that idea of entropy. And so those were little things and intangible things, none of that turning into anything, but it's kind of just building up this kind of tools and set.
Okay, so we're going to come on I think in the next part about what we can do when there is maybe an idea that isn't going to get realised, and how we can deal with that. How do you deal with that? But obviously this is one that did happen. What would be, let's go straight in for some suggestions or tips. What are some of the things that you did to make it easier to manage? You knew, you kind of, I assume, had that feeling that it was going to happen at some point, but you had to be patient in doing what you could do. Is there anything specific that is maybe a takeaway that people can go, okay, yeah, I know I'm going to have to do 6 months. Time's not now, but it will come. How we can get in that preparation mode?
I think working to scale. So, because this is, it's an art project, so it's an obvious thing to make a maquette, make a model. So in September last year, I made like a 1 meter long model whilst watching TV, of an evening. Didn't really take real time out of my life. And I think that's something that anyone could do. It's an obvious thing when you're making a physical object, but there are other activities that you can do to kind of prepare, and so that when the day comes where you have the capacity and the opportunity, you're ready for it, as opposed to, like, the other thing with this is it was a real kind of like taking the bull by the horns, and I'm not very good at selling myself, but with this idea I was just like going to everyone and just being like, do you want to give me some money for this? It was, and I was making sure I'd done prep work, which I think in other contexts or other occasions I wouldn't have done until I knew it was going to happen. And I was just like, I'm going to make this model and I'm going to put it on the shelf, and I'm happy, like, just saying to myself, I'm happy if it's a year before this goes any further, but I can do this today, so this is what I'm going to do.
Okay. So that's a really nice takeaway for now, that experiment with it, explore it, find out what it is, because then if it does happen, you are totally ready. And you've fleshed it out. I guess it's that thing that they tell us to do at school, do all your development work in your art book, but most people want to jump straight to the final product. But by the sounds of it, there was a lot of benefit to that, being forced to take that time. Yeah,
and it needn't be that direct a thing, or like, this is a small model of the thing that I'm going to do. So lots of, in these intervening years, I've made lots of text works. So it's like little things on pieces of paper that I can type at my laptop, stuff that I could do in the environment that I was in, like with kids around and stuff. So that was the work I've made for the last 5 years. And so when I knew that was what this big work wanted to be, then that was changing the focus. The text things were much more concerned with human connection and with the kind of similar kinds of themes, where I think that was influenced the stuff that I was doing.
So all those little things, even at the time they may not have seemed relevant, became relevant or became a better skill at your art. Everything
that I was doing, kind of, I'm going to do this through the lens of, one day I'm going to make a big boat.
Okay, sounds good. Right, we're going to take a break. When we come back, I'd like to focus a bit more on those ideas that don't happen, and we'll see what the audience think as well, see if they want to contribute something to this idea. So we'll be back in a little bit. Welcome back. We're into part 2 of The Burden of Burning Ideas with Jim Lockey and our live audience. Are we going to do that every time?
Yes.
Yes, we have to clap every time. Okay.
Every time.
So we've had a couple of questions that we've been chatting about during the break. And I guess one that I want to start with is the one that I guess was most relevant, because you were saying about this time that you had to wait allowed you to do kind of, whether you call it research, trial and error, exploring different things. If the idea changes, though, does that make it better, or does it become compromised? Because you could say, well, you've only changed that because you realise it's not working or circumstances changed. Or is it actually exploring, because you maybe first saw it from one point of view and now you're seeing it from a much wider angle?
I think ideas have a life, and bringing something into reality, that's a process. And so the kind of things that, you make, if it was possible to make something and it be exactly the way you mentioned it would be, I would question at that point what the point of making it was.
Yeah.
In a sense of, like, that's part of why you make things, is is to learn and to discover something new.
Yeah.
Especially I suppose with the work that I do, I'm more interested in in the process and in asking questions and in coming to a new perspective. That's kind of the reason I'm doing it. So sometimes when if you're forced to sit and wait on it, that can change things just through your circumstances or spending more time thinking about it.
Okay.
But
so with that in mind, potentially having an idea that wants to escape but can't gives you a chance to learn about it, both not only kind of how we experience that situation, that part of the process, but also gives it time to come to life and you to get more of what you want from it ultimately, which is to learn about what it is and who you are and everything.
Yeah. Okay. And I think another thing that came out of the discussion in the break is sometimes you have an idea and part of it is the urgency of it, that there isn't time to wait. Like that was mentioned, and I totally get that as well.
Yeah.
And again, like in this intervening time, it's so at one point I had, so in the past I've done kind of performative things, and I've wanted to do a performance, and it was that kind of, I haven't got time to prep all that, but I had time to prep a 5-minute thing, so I did a 5-minute turn at an open mic kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it's that kind of being okay with the circumstances where you are, because that does inform what you do in a practical sense as well as in a kind of like mental space sort of sense. Yeah.
So it's this idea of patience. That was actually one of our discussions from last week. Should we be more patient? I guess I'm taking it more, we were talking about it last week on a practical basis, but from a creative viewpoint. When I totally agree with you and get that feeling, and it kind of really pulls for you to be in action around your idea, but is that potentially where we should be going, no, this is what I meant to experience, that urgency and forcing myself to wait, as opposed to the urgency it says I should do it?
I think that in a sense there's a point where you have to remove yourself from whatever that idea is and just think about like, what are my aims of what I want to get out at the end of this? Because there are times where what you want is a kind of, just a visceral, I want to have done something. And if that's the aim, then
that's when it maybe falls to be done,
But it might be something where actually like there's something like particular and meticulous and specific where the idea itself and what you want from it demands more time and demands more patience. Yeah. And that, I think that's a skill that has to be developed through just like experience of like learning to be patient, but also it's a kind of a dual thing of learning to be more patient when you need to be, but also learning to let go and be less precious when you need to be, so that you can just kind of do something. Yeah, definitely. And I guess especially if in that second example of taking its time, is if it's about the journey, then it's taking that all as part of it, as opposed to, because what you want from it is the journey, not necessarily the outcome. Yeah. So okay. And I also think it's good to think of each of these little things. I don't know what it's like in different contexts, but for me, it's each work is part of a bigger journey. So there is no kind of end point as such. Yeah. And so, I like to do kind of little things of like, almost, I think of it as just keeping my hand in, just like keeping the muscle memory alive between big projects. Yeah, definitely. I guess gestures. That bigger project or that bigger idea we're yet to realise, but is part of everything that we've done today. Okay, we're going to come back now to the thing that I promised at the end of the first link we were going to talk about, which was, what about those ideas that have to be given up? The hardest thing sometimes it feels like when you've got an idea and you have to admit this isn't going to happen, be it because you've got to choose between ideas or because you just simply do not have the time. Like you said, if it was an idea, those ideas maybe that had come up at that moment where you had your first kid or your wife had your first kid. She gets the credit. She does. That when having to give that up, and how do we say come to terms, or is that a bit over the top maybe to say? Go for it, it's fine. Because sometimes it can feel like it at the time, but we take it because we're in it. We're deeply engrossed in our idea, and we've got the blinkers on, and we maybe can't see beyond it. How do you experience that? And then we'll look at maybe how do we
deal with that feeling at the time, because it's completely man-made, like ourselves made, but we still have to deal with it. Big question. Let's start with the first one.
That's a big idea.
Yeah.
I think I would kind of rail against the idea that something would ever need to be completely gone.
Yeah.
And that I think from the ashes of any idea kind of going belly up, there's going to be something you can take. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I also think it's okay to, if we're using dramatic terminology, to mourn, if you're not able to do something goes wrong, or like circumstances change and something you thought you were going to do doesn't happen. Yeah. It's actually okay to just be real about how that makes you feel, and then that gives you you can unpack that, and that's how you find the things from it that you can do or take forward. And I think it would be foolhardy. I mean, I would admire anyone who was able to do it, to just like jump into the next thing like nothing had happened. Okay. So essentially what you're saying is, as kind of maybe over the top as it might sound, but in a small sense, is to give yourself the time between ideas, to let that idea dissipate before you jump into the next one, because otherwise you're jumping into the next one to cover up for the fact that this one didn't come to light. And I don't know about you, but I get so excited by that initial feeling of a new idea that it's almost like an addiction to that moment of the light bulb going on, rather than going, is that sustainable? This is where the analogy breaks down a bit, of talking about it a bit like a relationship, is that I think it's totally okay to cheat on your ideas, and have other ideas working at the same time and be working on other things. Mm-hmm. And I think that makes it easier. Yeah. Like if you've got one thing, it's like, I'm going to make a cardboard boat, and if tomorrow something happens and I don't know, the space gets flooded and it's destroyed before it's even made, and I run out of time. Yeah. Like the truth is, actually, I'm working on some other ideas as well. I've been cheating on that idea, and I can, so even whilst mourning the boat, I can be, okay, I'm going to go and do this other thing. Yeah. We'll keep going. So it's a little bit of both. You totally have to take time, but also it's recognised that our minds, which is where these ideas are springing from, they're big, kind of like powerful things capable of containing kind of a lot more than we're even aware of. Is there any practical tools that you use to get some of those, like you said, they're a huge capacity, but sometimes they do get a bit clogged up, like a hard drive that's just got a little bit too much and you need to just like take it out, put it onto an external hard drive. Is there any tips you use to either manage multiple ideas at various stages, or to kind of clear a bit of RAM? Yeah, as I make small gestures of like this little thing, kind of just to get it out. And so I was saying earlier about I do a lot of text work. Is I will making a text work doesn't take long, and so part of that is kind of being anti-aesthetic. So it's not about what it looks like. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of all built into it, that I can just go and. So I've got one in my pocket. Okay. I made one this afternoon because I thought, so maybe I'll do that. I'll show you it in a bit. Okay. But also it was to do, because I thought we might end up talking about kind of when you're in that situation where you can't do a lot, is to work to the parameters that you have. Yeah. Use those restrictions to kind of drive you. Because I think that's the thing. You can have an idea for a really great, big, massive project. You can have an idea for a multi-million-pound movie or whatever that you would never be able to do. But something from that could work as a as a play or whatever. And you've still expressed it. I guess we were talking about the idea of that inspiration coming and it needing to be kind of got out, and you've got it out in one form, and it may kind of come out and not be necessarily what you thought, but you've got it out of yourself or out of your mind or whatever it may be. Yeah. To free up some space, hopefully, for that, whatever there might be the ideal when the time is right. So, okay, it's
good stuff. Right, we're going to be back in a little bit. Part 3 coming up. The burden of burning ideas has been our topic. So Jim, I think it's time to go full circle. I'm going to try and ask you a clear question with this because it's a massive topic. There's no clear answers or advice. I think it's just this idea of exploring it, getting it out there. It's something we all experience from time to time. But so let's try and bring it full circle, shall we? That we've been talking about ideas, that initial stage, but ultimately with any piece of art, there is some element where you create this work to connect with others, to have it have an impact for others, to engage with others, to explore a topic in the context outside of our own head. Otherwise, the idea would just sit in our head, wouldn't it? And you mentioned entropy as well. So with it coming full circle, is there a link between, I guess, this topic and how the idea was formed and the key topics you're looking to address? You mentioned it was kind of looking at grief and this idea. Does that kind of idea of getting over an idea come back in? Does our topic today relate to your overarching concept of the boat? I guess so, in the sense of, in my everything that I do is it's predicated and built upon. I'm really interested in that relationship between artist and audience. And for me, a work it's about the conversation between, human beings, and any work, any individual kind of divisible, distinct, there's a word I'm looking for that I can't quite find, but thing, artwork is just a snapshot of that flight. Okay. Like, if anything, the work is the least important thing. It's about that dialogue. Okay. Even if that's a dialogue that I'm just imagining. Yeah. And so, I don't know. I've got lost there. You said before about doing the smaller ideas, the smaller expressions. This is and that's, if ever you kind of completely stop or lose sight of that, lose sight of this is. Anything that we do, any artwork, any music, or any kind of expression, it's just, a couple of monkeys talking to each other. And, we should never lose sight of that. And I suppose that's the thing, is the most important thing is to contribute and have that kind of reciprocal relationship, which is only possible at times when you get out of your own way to make things happen, or... So is there a little bit of, potentially with that in mind, and this whole idea of connection, which is quite separate, really, from this idea of a burning, all-consuming idea that gets us stuck in our head? But, yeah, I think it's... But I mean, does the fact that it's a burning idea and we have to get it out, is that not the time where we go, maybe we're getting overhooked on this, and who are you actually trying to connect with? What are you trying to say? Go and do it, rather than doing it through a piece of work, and then we get... Is that idea a distraction from the piece of work? Dismantling my worldview, Lee. Spoken my life to this. No, I think it's... Those little things, those expressions can be in service of, like this, the big idea. So for me, the boat at the moment is it's not the end. Yeah. It's part of this ongoing conversation, and every little gesture is part of that as well. And it's about kind of the life of the whole thing. So it would be, if everything was riding on this big idea, then that can be damaging. But it's about kind of the life of ideas and how these things flow together. And so all those little things, all those kind of small gestures, immediate kind of rough and ready things you do in between, are all leading to the next bigger thing, which is feeding into a bigger conversation, which is feeding into something else, and brings us back to the idea of entropy. Yeah. Well linked there. We linked it all the way back. So those little ideas are almost, again, we said at the beginning that there may be compromises, that you can't do your full thing, but are they actually opportunities to connect at an earlier point? Like, I'm a massive believer in, don't hold your idea forever and ever and ever until you've created it, and don't be a perfectionist and make it perfect. Like, get the idea out as soon as it comes into your head, because the expression of it might... will have you learn about it and realise if it's actually the right thing. Would
Yeah.
you agree with that? That you should, if you're talking about conversation, we should be talking more sooner at more stages rather than waiting till this idea is expressed in its fullest.
Yeah, I like that. I think the thing is to just do away with the notion of an idea expressed at its fullest, because I don't think that exists.
Okay.
I think it's totally okay to, put a lot of energy into a singular thing, but to know that that is not the end of it, and to know that there's more, so that the small gestures become as important as the big gestures, and that it's the process, it's the journey, and it's the dialogue that's what's most interesting. That's what keeps you going. It's not the idea. The thing that keeps me going is not the idea of making this film of a boat sinking. It is the, where does that lead next?
Yeah.
And you kind of, sometimes an idea comes like this one, where it's just like, I'm just going to hold on, I'm going to ride this till it gets to where it wants to go. And other times things feel more ephemeral. Like, everyone should go and look at the artist Dick Higgins, because he's amazing. And he's like really championed the idea of ephemera in art, where it's like, none of this stuff is really very valuable in all itself. So he would like make hundreds of photocopies of things and throw them out over lecture theatres, and that was his work. Was just like this thing that was just thrown out.
A gesture of it doesn't matter. Is that what it is?
No. I think the work was still important, but it wasn't. This is a photocopied piece of paper. The idea of something being ephemeral and transitory, and about that conversation, like that, it's the conversation is where the value is, not in what the object is or how long it took to make, or did it. All of those can be obviously important, but it's that kind of. It's that great leveler. So this boat is, I'm trying really hard to be true to traditional boat building techniques, and try and build a lot of like craftsmanship into it. So that's important for this work, but it's not. It's still just an object. Yeah. And everything. It's
a tool to create a conversation.
Yeah. A small gesture is as valuable as a big gesture. Like, the gesture is the important thing.
Okay. So would that be, have you brought it a nice full circle in that when you have that burning idea that you want to express, and you mentioned this earlier about, well, what do I have rather than going, what's the idea? Oh my God, I'm never going to have time to do this, or it's not available now. Start with that. What do I have the time? What do I have the practicalities, capabilities to do? What expression of this conversation, or what expression could I use as a tool to have the conversation that I'm really trying to have, as opposed to getting so hung up on what is the idea? Oh my God, this idea has to be huge. Going, no, it's the small thing to have the conversation.
Yeah. Okay, so should I do the demonstration? Should I do the thing?
Okay, do the demo.
Okay, I'll do the thing.
You've been dying to.
I saw you in the corner of my eye. So, by way of example of all this, is I had half an hour after running Holiday Club this afternoon and coming here, and I was like, okay, so we've got, camera, this thing's going to be, these are the circumstances that we've got.
Yeah.
These are the concerns that I have. This is what I'll do. So it's that kind of, like you were saying, you work to the restrictions that you have, and that takes you on that next bit, which may be towards something bigger or whatever. So this is a plan for a short self-assembly auditory art installation.
Okay.
Installation instructions. With the help of a browser plugin or third-party application, we'll record the audio from this video clip, isolating a section of time that began when I started to read from this piece of paper and ending at the conclusion of these instructions. Carefully edit out each instance of speech. Leave behind only the brief snatches of silence between words, the sounds of inhaled breath, and the background hum of the room. Stitch these snippets of snatched sound together so that they create a new moment never before heard, a moment generated by the speech you deleted but now utterly detached from it. It should sound like a moment of anticipation or revelation, Once you've created this moment, burn it to a CD, place the CD in the drawer, and forget about it.
Nice. Awesome. How'd that feel reading that?
We just made an artwork.
There we go. Well done, everybody. We made an artwork.
Yeah, and it's all about taking the moment that you have and the space that you have.
Yeah.
And if you don't have the capacity to make the big thing, just make the thing that is the size that you've got.
I like it. That's a great note to finish on. And really concludes it is, as you said that there, it was being very present. What do I have right now? What can I do right now to feel what you want to feel, to express what you want to express, or to connect in the way that you want to do? And you did that with your piece. And and hopefully everyone out there has got that same sense of kind of, what can we do right now, and being present rather than being anxious about the future all the time. So, Jim, thank you. It's been awesome. Tell us, where can we see your boat?
So
where can we see the film?
Normal Festival of the Brain is happening the 10th to the 13th of May, mostly at the Quarterhouse, and the film will be shown throughout the festival in the clearing. And
when are you actually going to be in your boat? When can we see it live? Or is that a secret?
TBC.
Okay. Stay tuned.
So it depends on the weather and things, and we've got to sort some things out, but it's going to be filmed.
Okay.
I really wanted to do it, so this is the thing.
Oh no, we're going to start off again.
The next segment after the segments, I wanted to do it on the harbour and have a live audience, and for various reasons that didn't work out, so that's why it's being filmed. So
okay,
it is a compromised thing, but it's a thing that's happening.
Okay, sounds good. And where can people follow you on the interwebness?
At Jim Lockey Comics on Instagram. I pretty much don't update anything else, so that's the best place to look.
Absolutely. Jim, thank you very much, and good luck with the rest of your project.
Thank you.
Thank you. Massive thank you to Jim Lockey and of course our live studio audience for the recording today, as we took on the rather large topic, the challenging topic of how do we deal with the burden of burning ideas. And as I said, I like the fact that even though it was definitely a hard topic, definitely an open topic, no right answers, but more an idea just to explore about how we experience it, how we can look at it maybe differently, and just to become aware of how we cope with things can sometimes make us, if nothing else, we're not going to not experience those things. If we've got that thing inside that starts to eat at us, maybe we can just catch it a little bit sooner and start to not make it go away, but just flip that idea, taking it from, oh my God, I have to get this out, and it's kind of taking over to going, no, what can I do? As Jim said, and I like how we went full circle, really to, as long as you're getting your idea out, what's the aim behind it? Why are you doing it? And really try and deliver that in a small package. You don't have to produce the massive feature movie. You can make a tiny expression, one line, one scene, whatever it may be, to get out what you need to express and really what you're hoping to achieve in terms of connecting with others in whatever form that may be. So massive thank you to Jim for taking on this rather large topic, and to our audience, and of course thank you very much to our sponsors. We have QBH Solutions, HR and business compliance support that isn't rocket science, makes it super easy, super manageable, so you can take the stress away of sometimes those scary kind of compliance thing if you are a small business. And we also have Bowlfish Glass Services. They are based right here in Folkestone. They are bespoke glass manufacturers, all kinds of crazy colours, crazy shapes. If you can't find it anywhere else, these are the guys to go to for all your interior design, construction needs, basically something that's a little bit unusual. They can help you turn your idea into reality. So massive thank you to them. Wouldn't be possible without their support. So please do go follow them. All the details will be in the description. And all that's left for me to say is thank you very much to you out there, you audience, and hopefully see you next week. Bye.